Welcome, everyone, to the Into the Harvest podcast, where I just learned I was hosting. It's so exciting to be here with all of you. I'm Abigail Wilson. I'm the editor-in-chief here, and I am joined by our leader of leaders, who is a good leader by just passing the buck to me, Andrew Stroud. We have a great show for you today, but first, I just wanted to remind you that we are here hopefully to encourage you in your walk with Jesus, in making disciples and being a disciple of Jesus. And that is what this show is all about. So today we have some fun things to talk about, but how are you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing good. Like we were just talking about, it's a little early and it's early in the week too. So we're trying to get up to speed. So this could be a fun podcast.
Yeah. It's already fun for me because I was just chilling over here waiting for you to start. No. All right. So friends, we're going to start today with a listener question, which is actually, I love it when this happens because we often will have someone come to us with a question that specifically relates to one of our other podcasts, which to me really exemplifies the idea that this is a conversation with you guys. So we may be over here talking, but we 100% want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts and opinions and also your questions. So today's listener question is from Luis de los Santos, maybe. Okay. Mm-hmm. And he put this on to our YouTube channel for episode 124, which was with our good friend Dave Perry. And he said, with Dave Perry's comments of God doing the heavy lifting in mind, what portion of discipleship are we responsible for? So this was a great question to just kind of go a little deeper into what Dave was talking about, which once again, we can never get everything we want to into an episode. And so Thanks guys for bringing things back up so that we get a chance to talk about it some more. So Andrew, I'm going to throw it to you first.
Yeah. And Luis has asked a lot of great questions.
Yes.
So
Luis is like, he gets a gold star on the good questions.
Yeah, he asks them and they're good questions. So, this question in particular, Cecil Bean was on our last podcast, episode 128, and he said something, he talked about this as well. What portion are we responsible for as followers of Jesus and as disciple makers? And what part of the work can God alone do? It's a great question because, for one, we don't want to shoulder the things that only God is capable of shouldering. But two, we do want to excel and take ownership of the parts of the work that we've been assigned or tasked with. And, Jesus himself said that unless the Father draws people to himself, that they wouldn't recognize, they would not come to him. So even Jesus, as he walked the earth, he was not able to just make people believe, make people follow. So there's definitely a God's part, our part, when it comes to discipleship. And so I'm going to throw out the things that are top of mind for me, Abby, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts. So the first thing I would say is that we need to be modeling discipleship ourselves. So, of course, we're trying to encourage others to follow Jesus and to live this life of faith. But first and foremost, we need to be exemplifying that life, whether anyone responds and joins us in it or not. We want to be living a life of devotion to Jesus, a life of faithfulness, a life of following in his footsteps. And that is, I believe, first and foremost, our part of discipleship. And you could say like, well, that's not necessarily the same thing as disciple making. But I think that they're absolutely connected, because just as Jesus did not have, in a sense, he didn't have a catechism, or he didn't have a curriculum. His life itself was the model that he was inviting the disciples to join him in. And so I've been part of a running club here in San Diego the last few years. And there's so many great parallels with, I think, disciple making, because when when you're part of this running club, it is new runners are joining, and they're really becoming stronger runners, and they're learning a lot, whether it's about gear or training methods, but it's primarily about running. So like you have to actually get out there, and the best runners, the leaders of this running club, are the best runners. They're the ones who are out there running week in and week out.
Right.
No matter who's showing up to the weekly runs, those men and women are there. So that's number one. Our part is to simply be in the race and to be faithful. And then God's part is to bring us into contact with people who want to join us in that race. But what comes to your mind when you hear Luis's question? Or
yeah, it's always fun whenever you go first, because I'm like, you just took what I was saying. I'll just add to it. Yeah, I wrote modeling with an exclamation point.
There we go.
But I will just say, like, and in fact, I said it the opposite way in our intro today, but normally we say it, we're here to help encourage you to be a disciple and make disciples. And that's on purpose, because if we are not being a disciple of Jesus, then how in the world could we ever make disciples? But I will add to it that we are called to do that. So where it's not just, I'm just going to follow Jesus, maybe someone will notice. I mean, there is a little bit of action on our part. Like you said, they're out running, like they're out doing it. But also they've joined a running club, and they are intentionally involved with other people, and offering their wisdom and insights and whatever. So I think the other thing that I was going to add was also, and I would just made me think of 1 Corinthians 2, that when Paul says, like, I just was Christ Jesus and him crucified, and that's all I was to you. And I think that's the other part, especially in life on life discipleship. So often it can kind of get muddied with like my own opinions, my own little or even my tools, which are really excellent, fabulous tools, by the way. But just making sure that even when I'm offering up good advice or good tools or good whatever, that it always goes back to Jesus Christ and him crucified. So that in the end, I haven't just made a disciple of Abigail, but a disciple of Jesus. So I think that that constant reminder of pointing to Jesus and pointing to him, and in my own life, but then also intentionally doing that when I'm trying to disciple someone too. So keeping the focus on Jesus, which was actually the main topic of our conversation with Cecil on this past episode. It was bad quality of audio. Yes, it was. But let's not make that the focus. It was so good. I literally am gonna re-listen to it with my son later, because he likes to watch our shows sometimes, and so I'll pick really good ones that I'm not in. So but yeah, it's great. If you guys haven't listened to it. I was trying, I don't know, and I'm not an audio expert at all, so this is all amateur, guys. So but we were using 2 microphones, which is the first time we've done that. And I don't know, something happened, the wires got crossed. Okay. But Cecil, it's fine. Yeah, you can hear what he's saying. It's not that bad. No, it's not. 50 plus years, and that's been with Cecil. I would just say that's been one of the things that I really appreciated about his life, is that he just has stayed focused on Jesus, and not in a esoteric sense. Like, he's in a very practical sense. He's trying to pattern his life after Jesus. And what does that look like in 2022 for him as a guy in his mid 70s? It's definitely inspiring. Yeah. And if you are one of those people that's complained about people that, you don't have anyone older to follow, we got somebody for you, friends. He's in his mid 70s. He's still going strong. So it's really great. My son also was on our YouTube channel just a few minutes ago, and he was like, this guy really beat you in views, mom. Like, I'm like,
Oh,
it's not a competition. It's so rude.
it's
So
not a
anyway, friends, if
competition.
you couldn't come back and help a girl out, maybe when I'm 75 or something.
That's right. I think he probably knows a few more people. So
He definitely does. No, it's things for me to work towards, I guess. Okay.
Well, a couple other things. So we talked about modeling. We've talked about staying
Mhm.
focused on Jesus as being our parts in discipleship. A few more that I would throw out there, Abby. One would be taking the initiative. I do think that as
Yes.
believers who are more mature, further along on the path, it's our part to reach out to and to invite the younger generation or those who are still outside the faith. Now, that invitation may be declined, it may be ignored, but that's still on us to Jesus said he would make them fishers of men. And so you have to cast out the nets. And the story about the disciples who fished all night and caught nothing, sometimes ministry feels that way. You're casting out the nets over and over and over. So you can't make the fish get into the net, but you have to put the net out. Like, that's on you. So initiating and inviting, I think, are definitely our part. And then I would say prayer is something that Jesus modeled, and it's something, it's kind of where our part and God's part meet. You could say we should be praying for those that we're reaching out to, those that we're discipling, and asking God to work in those ways that we cannot. So I think prayer is that's a fourth element that we could say is our part. But any thoughts on those or any others?
And yes, because I think especially if you feel inadequate or like you've never made disciples before, or maybe you're being discipled by somebody and you're like, man, they're the coolest. They have all the cool things to say. If I meet someone, I'm going to try to introduce them to the person discipling me.
Right.
Instead, I just encourage you, like, you have Jesus, like you, and that's your job, is to point people to Jesus. So you've got it. And so I think as a part of that, inviting people there, we have to, in a very humble way, think, man, I just want to join Jesus and what he's doing in this person's life. And it's not saying like that I have just tons of wisdom over here or whatever, I'm ready to go. You're not. You're going to learn along the way too. But it's being willing to step out and put yourself out there in a way and say, let's pursue Jesus together. So especially if you're feeling a little inadequate, which is me all the time, then you can remember that it is just you pointing to Jesus and bringing them alongside with you. And so I agree, like it does take intentionality on our part, but sometimes it also takes like a real act of faith on our part, which plays perfectly into the prayer part too, Andrew, because if you don't have disciples, you want a running mate, you want people to share Jesus with, then start by praying for those people, and you don't even know their names yet. So I think prayer is before, during it, all the way, till the end of their days. I mean, prayer is key. And I'm glad that's probably the one to leave everyone with, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the one to do.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, we probably had more to share on that, but we have to keep on running, friends. We're going to head into our main portion today, our main topic. So today is our last episode of you and I together, Andrew, before our little summer hiatus where I'm going to move to a new country, and I don't know what you're going to do.
not move to a new country.
But it can't be as exciting as my summer plans.
No, it's not.
But before we head into that little summer break, where we will be bringing you some content, so don't worry. We thought we would just do a little halfway point year in review of the lessons that you and I have learned this year from the Lord, Andrew. So I'm excited to get into this. I've definitely learned some lessons.
Right.
How about you?
We normally do these kind of at the end of the year, or maybe at the beginning of the year. We'll kind of start off with what did we learn in 2021. But Abby, I think for both of us, it feels like it's been a year. I think, 2022, it does. Like there's definitely some lessons that have been learned so far. And so, we thought this might be a good way to jump into the summer break
Yeah,
and we can.
we're just being just transparent with you guys that we can learn things in 6 months. So
I think we're being forced to.
yeah. Or maybe
But
we'll still be learning it at the end of the year too.
yeah, I think so too. I think so. And by the way, just on this side note, I'm hoping, no promises, but I'm hoping that we'll still have some podcast episodes over the
Oh
summer
yeah.
break.
Yes. Be
I don't
here,
know.
friends. They just may not look like
Yeah.
this.
I mean, unfortunately, Abby, you will not be with us because you'll be traveling. You'll be trotting the globe.
I don't know. Maybe I'll send like a travel log and
Yeah, that'd be cool. That would be cool. But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully we will have some things for the crew over the summer. So we'll see. But yeah, we're going to talk about lessons learned so far in 2022. So do you want to kick us off, or do you want me to?
Okay, I can. So the first major lesson I've learned this year stems from Proverbs 16:9. Does everyone know this verse where the man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his path? That's real truth, friends. And this verse has always kind of played a real role in my life because I'm a real planner. And so it's just back when blogs weren't even a thing, I had a blog and this verse was at the top of it. And I feel like I should just bring that back because this has been such a key part of my life in the last 6 months. But not only is it just truth that I've relearned, but also having that mentality of taking all of my plans that I have made with my little heart and giving them to the Lord to direct my steps. He will do that even if we haven't asked him to. But there is such joy and real peace in being able to bring the plan we've had and leave it at his feet to direct us. That said, it takes some real work and maybe some struggles and some tears too.
Yeah. Do you find that's changed over the years? Like as you've gotten more mature as a follower of Jesus, and as you've seen your plans sometimes get jumbled up as God directs your steps in new ways, do you find that it's gotten easier? Like, is it harder because you're getting further on in life and now you've got kids who are part of the package as well? Or is it pretty similar to what it was when you were first
that's a
learning?
Great question. I hadn't thought about it, but I think in some ways it's gotten easier because I know the joy and the peace of walking in step with what he wants. But I also think it's easier because a lot of my struggle in early years was that the anxiety that I would get from a change of plan, I would take as, oh, this must not be God's plan for me if I'm not like at perfect peace. And so, but that was really just me. So it's really being able to discern God's plan and God's voice and his direction has probably gotten easier for me over the years. But yes, adding things like kids, that probably caused me the most anxiety now. But boy, what a lesson to have to like give God your children and be like, here you go.
Right.
They were yours from the beginning. So yeah.
No, that's definitely a big one. I know when we moved this last time, which has been coming up on 10 years now.
Really? Not longer? It feels like you've been there forever. Yeah, I guess it is 10.
But we had our oldest two, especially, one was halfway through high school and the other was just starting high school. And that was, I think as a parent, that was kind of tough just because it's already a challenging season for teenagers, at that point. And then as a parent, you know that you're making a choice that is probably going to put them in an even more challenging position. So you do have to just trust that, hey, we're doing this because we're convinced this is what God has for us and our family. And we have to trust him to watch over the kids, but also help the kids work through things, because
Yeah.
there are downsides, there are challenges that our kids face as a result of our choices and our decisions. And
Yeah.
sometimes, we can't fix those downsides directly. It's kind of back to Luis's question. There's aspects that only God has to swoop in and help them with. And I say
Yeah.
swoop in, but with our kids, it was there were things that took months for them to work through.
Yeah.
Which is, it's hard as a parent, but yeah, I do think that's a part of it that.
Yeah. I mean, it was the first, this whole move thing was the first time that I had really felt so strongly that we were about to make a life decision that was going to impact my kids' whole like future life.
Yeah.
Like this would be something
Right.
they would talk about when they're like 25, like, oh, that time my
Oh,
parents
well, yeah.
like ripped us up and took us to Germany.
Yeah.
And so that was really impactful, but already, especially, some of the older kids, have already just had really like special times with the Lord, just personally, just them and God, that I don't think would have happened if we hadn't done something crazy to their lives. In fact, I know they wouldn't. I mean, maybe at some point they would have had, just a real crisis where it was, they just, called out to God and asked for help. But to have that come about because of something we've done to them is actually really such a good reminder from the Lord of like, I'm going to use this as well in your kid's life, the hard stuff. So I'm sure I'll have to re-listen to this to remind myself of this later.
Yeah. I mean, we when we first talked about this episode, we were going to center it on lessons I've learned since shifting to bivocational work. And then we wanted to broaden it. There's a lot that God has taught us over the first 6 months, both of us, but we'll have to do the same, down the road as you guys get settled in Germany,
who knew I'd have life excitement too? Not just for you, Andrew.
That's right. 2022. Well, did want to share a little bit, and we still got some time, but I would say some of my lessons so far with shifting into bivocational work is that God uses all of life to shape us, and in some ways we did expect there to be a pretty big a new normal for us in terms of weekly rhythms and how I spend time from day to day. And then what actually happened, there were a few other things that happened within our family, with our extended family, that actually took a lot of time in the first part of the year. And so sometimes people would ask me, how's it going? It's like, well, the job is going fine. That's actually
that's
not
the least of my concern.
Right. That's the easy part. But I think in the midst of all of it, it's been a reminder that God is using all of those fluctuations in life, the challenges, the stressful moments, the relationships that He brings into our lives. He's using all of that to shape me and Cindy and our family. And that's been, it's not necessarily a brand new lesson, but it's been a freshly learned, relearned lesson, is that a lot is going on. And I am like, by nature, I love challenges, and I love conquering challenges. So,
only conquering, not, you don't like failing them?
Well, no, I don't like failing them at all. And I can also miss the joy of the journey. Right. And so I think as this year has unfolded, there have been like these challenges that have just sort of cropped up. And I think that God has given me the ability to step back on a more regular basis and just appreciate that this is a moment in time. This is a challenge that's happening right now, that it may be a super stressful moment, but God is in there with us. And I don't even have to know what the lessons are at that moment. But just realizing that it's not going to be this way forever. We're probably going to conquer this mountain with God's help. And in the meantime, just appreciate all the ways that he is showing up and taking care of us. And I've been reading the Exodus journey in my quiet times. And I think that was one of the mistakes that the people of Israel made as they came out of Egypt and they were in the desert, is they just, they wanted to get to the promised land. They didn't like the desert, which is understandable, the wilderness, but they failed to catalog and appreciate all the ways that God was providing for them, all the little hills that he was allowing them to overcome along the way. And then unfortunately, when the big hill came, which was, okay, now go in and take the land, they failed to trust God, which is really what it says, that they didn't obey because they failed to trust God. They didn't trust him. And they didn't trust him because they didn't remember all the ways that he had come through. So I think that's one of the big lessons so far that I'm learning, is that even in things that don't seem spiritual, they don't seem focused on my growth as a follower of Jesus, God's using that. God's using that to shape and develop us in ways that are going to play out in a very a kingdom-oriented way.
Yeah. So even as you're even sharing this, and it kind of ties in to this question of, you were in full-time ministry. And if we thought about our lives in the context of a newsletter, let's say, because we know so many people who have to send out newsletters because they fundraise or whatever. Has it been, do you think about your life in that way of the highlight reel that you would share with someone? And does this look different in the sense that it's not the same types of highlights? Does that feel different? Or have you been able to transition into what? The highlights can just be that we, took care of our family well. And you know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean. This is a little bit of for folks who aren't in full-time ministry. There are certain things that happen in ministry where you're you see God at work, but it won't come through in a newsletter. It won't, it's not something that people are going to be oh, wow. That's definitely true. I think that's true that just in general, when you're in ministry, I don't know if I've ever thought of it that way, but there's so much happening that doesn't make it into the newsletter. And wouldn't, even if you tried to sit down and write it out, because it just doesn't translate that neatly. It's definitely true, I think. And there are also things so when I think about the life of Joseph and how God gave him these dreams when he was a teenager, and they weren't very detailed dreams. The moon and stars were bowing down to him, and stalks of wheat were bowing down to him. But God had a plan for his life. That was the bottom line, is that God had a purpose for his future, and that involved leadership of some sort. And of course, we know the story. So we know that eventually he becomes basically the prime minister, second only to Pharaoh, which was the most powerful kingdom at that time in the Middle East. But the journey to go from a teenager to being elevated to that position was a 13-year journey, from the time he was 17 until he was 30. And then the fulfillment of the dream didn't happen for another 9 years. So he's 39. So it's 22 years from the time of the dream to it being fulfilled. But God was at work throughout that entire process in many ways that if you had looked at, you would not have recognized. And so I think, I don't know exactly how that's playing out right now and how God is shaping me specifically, but I will say that when it comes to ministry, when we went into full-time ministry, as the years passed, I realized that a lot of what I did, a lot of the experiences that I had and the work that I did as a project manager and as I was a mechanical engineer. And so I would design and our company would build industrial equipment, specialized industrial equipment. And on the face of it, there's no connection really between that and,
Oh, but there is.
But there were so many things that I could see God used to shape me so that when we were in full-time ministry, I was using a lot of those skills and things that I had learned. And I think the same was probably true for Joseph. You know, he was given responsibility in the household of Potiphar. He was given responsibility and oversight in the jail. And those were things that shaped him. So that when he was given those responsibilities in Egypt.
It ties back into what you were saying about appreciating the journey so well, because I just, finished reading about Saul and David as well. Saul became king like boom, instantaneously. Things did not go well. And David had this whole period of
he did
just very similar to Joseph's story of just like, boy, trial by fire. But that prepared him to be king. And we know God, like a man after God's own heart. And so just realizing, whatever like crazy cave you find yourself in, it's probably for really great reason. Like enjoy the cave. I don't know.
Well, I think I love that you connected David, and I have like a little devotion that I sometimes share about how our identity leads to a legacy, like being clear on your identity. So David is who I like to use on that. Obviously, he was anointed king, and so he was anointed future king of Israel as a young man, probably a teenager, and that was clear. The prophet Samuel had anointed him, and I think in the same way, perhaps Joseph knew that I don't know how he held on to this, but he clearly did. Like later in life, he said, God, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And somewhere along the way between slavery and prison, Joseph did the math and figured that out, that this was not the end of the story, that God still had this purpose. And so in the same way, even though we may not enjoy the moment that we're in, we may not understand exactly how it's shaping us. If you are clear that there's a higher calling on your life. And so I think that's the challenge, is to not get lost in the development. So if you're working a job, or if you're going through a stressful moment or season, to not just have all of your focus on that, but to take a step back and realize that, okay, God is doing something in my life that's going to relate to this future purpose that he has for me.
Good word. Yeah, man, you're gonna have to like record that identity and talk sometime.
Maybe that could be a podcast. Maybe that'll be one of our summer specials.
You guys agree. Let's all send Andrew messages to remind him to do that for us. That would be really cool. Yeah, cool. I think that idea of really understanding our identity in Christ is so key for all of us, no matter what season you're in. Because if you're having a high, you can kind of forget about your identity. You're like, oh, I'm doing great.
Yeah.
And in the lows. So I think it's really, really key. Oh man, Andrew, we could have clearly spent a ton of time on this.
Yeah.
But we don't have it. So on we go. Don't worry, friends. We have plenty of lessons to share with you in the future. Stay tuned.
We're still learning.
Yeah, we are. All right. So we will now get into our final part of our podcast today, our faith and culture portion. All right. So for faith and culture today, we're really kind of doing a little general snapshot of how things are going in the world. That's culture. Spoiler, it's not going great. Things are, and Andrew wrote in our notes, the sky is falling. This is true. And I only know it because, Andrew, I have been in a little tiny bubble of like trying to deal with my own little world. And so I don't read the news or anything, but my dad was visiting this past week and he loves a good news feed. And so periodically I would walk by him in the kitchen and he would be on his phone and he would just remind me that the sky was falling in some form of piece of like nugget of news, like P.S. Abigail, so-and-so invaded so-and-so and everyone's gonna die. Oh, Abigail, guess what? This terrible thing happened. And I'd be like, thanks, love you. So thanks to my papa. Love him. I don't think he listens. All
Well,
right.
yeah, we always do like little conversations, obviously, before we do the show. And
Yeah.
so we were like, well, faith and culture. And typically there's oftentimes something specific that's happening in the world of culture, the broader society that we're all part of. But with this one, it was like, it's more of this overall sense that
Of a downer. Yeah.
of a downer. And I think most people, probably our listeners, will get it. Because if you think about it, whether it's geopolitics, that's not going great, with the whole situation with Russia and Ukraine, and how that's affecting us. And people are talking about a coming famine. You know,
Oh yeah, that was one of the things that I got.
yes, exactly. It's coming. And then
Okay, cool.
socially, it's I don't know, it's Pride Month, and there's just lots happening in so
June is a rough month.
Yeah, in society, that we would say, man, where are we going as a country in terms of social mores and values? Like everything's in flux. And then of course the economy is not doing
we
so
get
great
it
right
we
now.
get it,
Yeah, so it's kind of like, well, let's just talk about the overall, like,
let's watch Andrew spiral. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, this is the thing
He's
is the thing that hit me, is like, well, as believers, really, should any of that really shake our commitment to faith, hope, and love? Like, it seems to me that as Christians, we should be the ones who are just sort of chugging along, and people are looking at us like, what is wrong with you people? Like, why do you have hope? Like, how are you able to be loving to others, and to be confident about the future, to have faith that things are going to work out? And so it was sort of a check for my own spirit, like, hey, are you being brought down by everything? One, I do think that a lot of times we hear the negatives. So I always am convinced that it's rarely as bad as it sounds. But two, even if it is bad, that's not what our ultimate hope is set on. So, shouldn't we actually be standing out more and more in society as people who aren't shaken by, the bad news that's coming our way?
Yeah. I think that maybe the tip or the tool for us is just take a check to see how news is affecting you. If you're leaving your news time during the day, whenever that is, and you really are just rock bottom and you're having to like crawl your way back up, and I'm sure you are, because if you're following Jesus, you do know the truth. You can ultimately get back there, but are you having to fight it every single day? And I think that's right. That was part of that whole thing with my dad, which was kind of funny, because I would just like walk by and I'd be like, guess what? And I thought, man, I'm so grateful that I'm not having, because bless his heart, he was having to do that every day. Right. And he was, and he also gave me nuggets of hope. Don't worry, my dad's awesome. But he was having to really fight it out over there, and I was just getting to like, focus on the little things. So I think I was recently, somebody introduced me to Pour Over News. Do you know about Pour Over News?
No.
So it is, you can sign up for it. It's a Christian news service, and they'll send you emails, and it's just like the top news stories, and they'll just give you like a brief update of what they are, and you don't have to, I don't know, weed through quite so much. So I'm really appreciating that tip from my good friend Laura. Maybe we'll leave a link for you guys if you want
we'll try to do that.
To do a newsletter essentially in your inbox. I haven't been on it for super long, so I can't tell you just like how great it's going to be for my news intake as far as, politics and stuff. We'll see. But things like that, I think, are really helpful for us in our spiritual health of making sure we are having the ratio right?
Yeah.
Of like, because it's going to come at us. I don't know how you do your news, Andrew.
Yeah.
How do you take it in?
Yeah. Probably I do get a similarly, it's not a Christian service, but I do a daily email with snippets called Morning Brew. So
Oh, yes.
I don't
Why are they all related to coffee? Okay.
know. That's a good question.
We're over Morning
I
Brew.
I don't always read the Morning Brew, I have to say. So maybe
Yeah,
one out of the 5 days I'll actually kind
sure.
of see what's going on. But Twitter is also I'll see kind of what's going on. Again, I try not to do crazy deep dives, but I'll just kind of catch things here and there. And if it's interesting, then I'll do a little bit of a deeper look. But I definitely don't just sit down and watch the news or even scroll news sites, because I do think it's bad for your mental health.
Yeah.
And that's the flip side, I would say, is let's make sure that we're still exposing ourselves to, the good news, because this is part of how our human brains work, is, we sort of absorb what it is that we're exposing our minds to. And sure, there's a lot of bad things happening in the world. So if you're just constantly exposing yourself to that, it's going to have an impact, especially if you're doing that and you're not, on the other hand, exposing yourselves to the hope, the source of our hope, our joy, the reason that we have to have hope. So I would say, for sure, let's make sure that we're staying focused and continue to expose ourselves to God's word and his truth, so that we can be people who, stand out in a world full of darkness.
I mean, in some ways, we always think of like sidewalk prophets as like the sky is falling, the end of the world is coming. But let's try to be prophets that are saying, guess what? The justice of Jesus is coming.
Right.
I was having a great conversation with one of the guys in our church, Nate Clark, last night, and he was saying, really, just people are looking for justice.
They are.
And so we have the answer to that, right? We have ultimate justice. My son Justice kept thinking we were talking about him.
Ultimate justice.
Ultimate justice. But so true, friends. We actually have the best news to give people in the midst of all the bad news. So yeah, I think finding that balance for ourselves to help our own mental health, but also to not forget that this is our perfect opportunity to bring something that the world ultimately is longing for. It just may not fully realize it. So
yeah.
All right. Well, friends, it's been tons of fun. We can't believe that it's already to summer. But here we are, and we will be bringing you some fun treats this summer. So be on the lookout. If you haven't subscribed, that's probably the best way to keep up with all the goodness that will be coming your way this summer, because it may be on a little bit of a different schedule. It'll be a surprise to show up in your feed. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, on Instagram and Facebook. And if you aren't subscribed on a podcast listening service, that's also one of the best ways to make sure you don't miss any of the goodness coming your way this summer. So we will also be back in our regular scheduled programming soonish. So prepare for that fun to come. And as always, keep in touch. We want to hear your comments, your thoughts, your questions. We love having feedback with you guys. So keep it up, and we are so grateful you're listening. Thanks.